Hello again everybody, and today I'm going to be talking about Greek comic theatre. This is an introduction to some plays which I'm going to talk about in the next couple of days, but some background first of all about the Athenian comic theatre, because it's pretty unusual. This came into being in the 5th century BC, same time as Greek tragedy, which I've spoken about already, but it's a very interesting thing, because it introduced the idea of mockery and laughter into the theatre. Now, I've always thought that political regimes everywhere have shown their weakness by trying to ban satire and ban political mockery. Well, in Athens in the 5th century BC, it was a really big deal indeed. If you think about the number over the centuries, the times and groups of people who've tried to ban mockery, whether this has been religious groups, churches of different kinds and denominations, political regimes, both right and left wing, many regimes, even in our own times, have tried to ban things, particularly to ban the idea of political satire. I don't think there have ever been as many societies in history which had as open an idea about the freedom of speech and what was acceptable on the stage as Athens in the 5th century. The comic theatre grew along with their radical democracy and the idea of freedom of expression. It was more or less uncensored. There were some attempts made by one or two politicians to prosecute playwrights for what had gone on the stage, but it's not really a thing at all. Anything, pretty much, could be a target. Lazy people, lazy slaves, lazy rich people. It was very, very popular to mock the lazy rich. It was quite common to mock gods and organised religion. It was very, very common, and an essential part of all this, to mock politicians. It was even the case that you mocked the writers of comedies themselves and tragedy writers too. Huge amount of obscenity, great deal that you'd struggle to put on literally on the modern stage. Lots and lots of clever wordplay, which is pretty difficult to translate into English from classical Greek. There was dance, there was music, there was political satire, there was pretty much a bit of everything, and it was very popular. Mostly we know about this from the plays of a writer called Aristophanes. 11 of his plays survive. He wrote a good deal more, but we're quite glad to have 11 of his plays. And in the next couple of days I shall talk about 2 of those. There's some evidence about what he wrote and how the theatre was from later writers, and there's quite a bit from archaeology, especially from pottery painting, so we know what comic costumes looked like and so on. It was performed mainly in the winter festival called the Lenaea. There were 2 big dramatic festivals in Athens, the Dionysia in spring, which is mainly tragedies, and then the Lenaea in the winter time, which was mainly comedies. Now this meant that the audience, rather than being from all over Greece, it was likely to be a more homegrown audience, so mockery of one's own kind, maybe it was easier to be free about that in those circumstances. We don't know whether the actors were the same actors who acted in tragedies, but we do know that the plays were put on in the same theatre, or indeed theatres. The Theatre of Dionysus in Athens, other theatres elsewhere, places like Thorikos in Attica, for instance, Epidauros, which is sort of near Mycenae, near Argos. The costumes were highly extravagant, very brightly coloured, very ornately decorated. The masks, which all actors wore, both tragic and comic, they were highly exaggerated, had exaggerated features, might have had brightly coloured hair. There was excessive padding on the actors, so you might have had characters with extremely fat tummies and very large behinds, and they also had large phalluses, large padded leather phalluses, and these formed quite a feature in much of the comedy. There was a lot of phallic humour. There were lots of outlandish characters too, exaggerations of well-known figures of the day, but occasionally you got whole groups in the chorus. Rather than being people, these would be creations like birds, for instance, or frogs. And there was some clever language that went with that, some not so clever. Aristophanes played the frogs, for instance. Their classic thing to say is brekekekeks, coax, coax. So, at the end of the play, whatever had gone on in the play, however complicated the plot had got, generally speaking, it ends with a big parade that goes out into the street. And the idea is that it spills out into the street, and then we're going to go out and have lots of drinking, lots of dancing, and generally celebrating. So a thought I want to leave you with today is maybe we could do with a bit of that right now.